In the 1960s and 1970s, Hollywood would enter and leave a new era, featuring movies that were reliant on passionate directors rather than wealthy studios and formulas. And during this time, rock stars weren't just writing songs, they were starring in films. Athletes weren't just competing, they were playing themselves on screen. Cultural icons weren't staying in their lanes, they were invading the cinema landscape. This wasn't just stunt casting, it was a shift in how fame worked. The 1970s held a revolutionary moment when cinema itself became celebrity currency. We can take a look at Bob Dylan. In 1973, Dylan appeared in Sam Peckinpah's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, playing the mysterious drifter Alias. He also composed the film's soundtrack, including the now iconic song Knockin' on Heaven's Door. But Dylan wasn't cast because he was a trained actor. He was cast because he carried cultural weight. By the early 70s, Bob Dylan wasn't just a musician, he was the voice of the generation. Putting him inside a revisionist Western was an attempt at something symbolic. It merged the mythology of the American frontier with the attitude of 1960s rebellion. Dylan's presence turned this film into something contemporary, even though it was set in the past. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer didn't necessarily call on Bob for his talent, they were borrowing his celebrity aura. And it wasn't just musicians. In 1977, Muhammad Ali starred in The Greatest, a dramatized retelling of his own rise to fame and champion. Ali was already one of the most photographed and filmed men in the world, so what makes this film so special? It allowed the masses to hear his story the way he wanted it to be heard. There is a sense of intimacy when a celebrity shows their narrative to be heard on such a large scale. It turned his life into a legend, and people were so curious to see behind the curtain of Muhammad Ali. So why was this happening? Why did so many celebrities outside of traditional acting move into film during this era? By the late 60s, the studio system was dying. The polished, contract-bound machine of the 1950s was fading. In its place came the new era of Hollywood. It was riskier, director-driven, and youth-oriented. Studios were desperate to attract younger audiences. And who had youth audiences? Rock stars, athletes, and cultural rebels. Casting them wasn't random. It was a tactic to bring in crowds and a way to make deals with potential rich celebrities to bring money into filmmakers' budgets. The 1970s were obsessed with authenticity and identity. This was an era of confessional songwriting, political protest, counterculture, and self-expression. Celebrities weren't just performers anymore. They were symbols for something more. Film scholars often describe this era as the age of auteur, the idea that directors were singular artistic geniuses behind a film's creation. But something similar was happening with all artistic mediums. Rock stars and athletes were becoming auteurs of their own mediums, breaking away from record label ideals or sponsorship restrictions. They began creating art that carried weight. Film allowed them to control and expand their message and image. Today, when a pop star launches a movie, audiences can quickly recognize it as cross-platform branding. It can be seen as shilling out, pandering, or an attempt to edge into a new medium for monetary gain. In the 1970s, this practice hadn't been established, and there was much more on the table to gain than there was to lose as a celebrity joining the film industry. A film could help promote an album. It could reinforce a public persona. It could expand a fan base. Or it could capture a live performance for mass audiences. Concert films like The Last Waltz didn't just document music. They amplified it and created a new experience. The 70s was a decade of enormous ego. Film directors had unprecedented freedom in their craft, and celebrities had huge amounts of influence in many different valuable areas, and studios were willing to gamble. When everyone believes they're an artist, everyone wants the biggest canvas available. And during this new era of Hollywood, film was that canvas. The real shift wasn't just that celebrities appeared in movies. It was that fame stopped belonging to one medium. The 1970s were the first decade where a musician, an athlete, a writer could step into cinema and not feel like an outsider, and audiences wouldn't question or flat out reject their presence. Today, crossovers are normal, but in the 70s, they were a strategic and powerful tool that didn't just change Hollywood, it changed what it meant to be famous.